Times Square is a mix of family-friendly characters like Elmo and the Lion King characters, and the seedy underbelly of New York City. To find out some more about what's going on in Times Square with prostitution and drugs, I met up with an expert, the Manhattan Madam, Kristin Davis.
I mean, Times Square has historically been a sort of underbelly of New York for 30, 40, 50 years, I think now. So there's lots of sex going on here, whether it's in the hotels or people on the streets here looking to traffic girls or, you know, anything else that's going on, sex, drugs.
The Manhattan Madam is famous for being caught up in the ex-New York Governor Eliot Spitzer prostitution scandal. She was providing him with prostitutes, and she ended up going to jail to pay for it.
So what's the phrase, pimpin' ain't easy?
Pimpin' ain't easy, it's hard out here for a pimp.
Right. At the beginning of her career as a madam, she actually started out in Times Square, hanging out around the strip clubs, recruiting prostitutes. But once her career really took off, at the height of her career, she was making $6 to $7 million in a year. She said that she was only dealing with wealthy and powerful men at that point.
Also did a lot of party calls, which were drug-based, so the guys would be partying, but they just wanted company. So that's actually how I made the bulk of my money. It wasn't through one-off sex. It was from somebody spending $12,000 a night, and you know, he's on a drug binge and just wants some company, or he's going out with his friends and he wants some girls to make him look good.
She says that prostitution in Times Square is at the lowest level. It's usually tourists who are interested, and they're very cheap.
Most of the high-end stuff goes on in Midtown for the working people, but Times Square, it's like they don't want to pay more than what they might get in their town, so $100 maybe max.
Okay, so it was never really worth your time.
No, I would have thrown your $100 right back in your face.
So while I was talking to her, we were approached by a man who was screaming about strip club, strip club. He had the whole song that he was doing.
G Club, G Club, G Club, G Club.
So then we walked around the strip clubs, and the Manhattan Madam told me some more about how prostitution takes place in open air.
Well, we're in front of a gentleman's store where there's a movie, $10 for 12 hours for private booths. So traditionally in places like that, it's where you might take someone, if a girl was working the street, she might take her guy here for $10 to have a or
Like a location where she would take him.
Yes, yes.
We also walked by one of the more famous strip clubs, Lace, and we spoke to one of the guys who was distributing flyers for that strip club. And I asked him, so what have you seen go down? He was kind of mum. He's like, look, I'm just working here.
All right, you're just giving out flyers, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
You know what I'm saying?
I know.
Evil see no evil. I got you.
And they both kind of understood each other.
It looked like there was something going on here.
Right, so you'd be suspicious of that, based off your experience.
Completely.
Now that she has been to jail, turned a new leaf, she's actually hit the streets of Times Square to help save women and get them off the streets.
As a advocate for sex workers and somebody who I also ran a nonprofit here that helped to try to get women who were forced into prostitution off the streets, and so this was the territory we canvassed.
And we also approached the cops because I wanted to hear from them what they're dealing with on the streets with prostitution and drugs.
Here with the Manhattan Madam doing a story about prostitution in Times Square.
Cannot comment on any of that.
Is any of that happening here?
No comment.
Right, I'm sure they can't talk. I'm glad you did this the way you did it, because I'm going to figure all of you too young to really remember what Times Square was like before Mayor Giuliani came in and really cracked down on the city's crime. I mean, Times Square today is just like the Disney store that's there, and there isn't really as deep-rooted a prostitution problem as there was 30 years ago.
Tim Tompkins, who is the president of the Times Square Alliance, has said that, Times Square is representative of what's working and not working in New York City. And I can still go through Times Square and not personally have an issue, so
Well, right, you heard our executive producer, Jerry Burke, talk about having to walk in the center of the street because it used to be so dangerous.
Right.
So it's a good perspective. But again, the evidence is there because the cops are arresting people for prostitution and drugs. But at the same time, I wonder how many of those guys approaching the reporter were just scammers looking for a stupid tourist to give them $100.
Well, here's the thing. I mean, I'm a native New Yorker. Times Square is the welcome mat to New York City. So the question is, how do we want to look to the rest of the world? Tourists, what do we want people to take away when they come to New York City?